Battlefield 5 in 2020. It's been a rough year and a bit for any Battlefield fan. While by no means things have been bad throughout, there has been plenty of ups and downs, steps forward and hope on the horizon, just for a new patch or change to undo pretty much all the progress made once more. Battlefield 5 is arguably in a as difficult spot now as it was at launch, and many of the problems at the root of those we were dealing with back in 2018 are still the cause of existing problems or new problems we are facing now. So as the year draws to an end, I thought it would be interesting to take a look at where we stand now, the problems we are facing, and what really needs to fundamentally change if Battlefield 5 is still to mirror the turnaround success that Star Wars Battlefront is a great example of. Unlike pretty much all of my usual videos, this one today is going to be mostly unscripted, free form, so feel free to jump into the comments down below and join the discussion if you feel so inclined. When it comes to Battlefield 5, the problems of course are numerous, but instead of talking about every single bug or issue that the game currently faces, there's plenty of great videos by other content creators out there that do just that. I want to talk about what is at the root of the problem, and the 4 things that DICE really needs to do if they still want Battlefield 5 to turn out to be the success they probably initially hoped it would be. And to start off with, we need to start at the root of what I would argue most of Battlefield 5's problems come from. And this goes all the way back to the first reveal trailer that we had back in 2018. What direction of a game is Battlefield trying to be? Are we looking at a casual experience where the explosions and the atmosphere are really what sell the game? Are we looking at a hardcore experience where balanced and solid gameplay are at the fundamental of your long-term enjoyment? And thus drawing in new players is the consequence of word of mouth and a stable good game that convinces players to invite their friends to come join them on the battlefield. Are you going for a Battlefield 4 type of game, a Battlefield 1 type of game, a far more casual version of both, a far more hardcore version of both? You cannot combine all those different things to create one game because you end up pleasing nobody instead of pleasing everybody, and that is fundamentally what was already the problem with Battlefield 5 at launch, when we were sold a hardcore experience with authentic gritty combat, but at the same time we're looking at silly and maybe even playful game mechanics and relatively unbelievable cosmetics that for many people simply ruined the World War II feel to begin with. DICE needs to be very clear in their head as to what they want this game to be and what they don't want it. The recent 5.2 update changes are an example of them essentially changing completely the direction they were going for the game. Now, I'm not saying I liked all of the aspects that were part of this authentic, more hardcore push with Battlefield 5, such as attrition, but to a certain extent they make sense in the space and the kind of game you're trying to create. And DICE needs to focus on one vision and go for that. And maybe the vision that is more akin to your current player base is likely the one to bring you more long-term success. Given that you're stuck with this game for 3 years, you may not want to piss off the entire player base after just 1 year already. Having referenced then those 5.2 gameplay changes, we move on to another point that is fundamental in my opinion currently to Battlefield 5's failing and the discontent that the community has with this game, and that is community trust. DICE has simply underdelivered, missed deadlines, or even flat out lied to their community 1, 2, maybe 10 too many times at this point. Take the recent 5.2 patch as prime example. We were told back when they last messed with time to kill, they would not touch it again. We were told when they first announced these weapon balance changes that they were only intended to mix up the weapon balance and further create variety between the different classes, making different weapons more viable, and that there was no intention to change the time to kill. Instead, recoil adjustments and fire rate would make up for the reduced damage at certain ranges. That was, of course, as they later frankly confirmed, a complete lie, and they knew that from begin with. That of course doesn't create a great taste in the mouth of fans of a franchise that have supported a development studio that really hasn't managed to deliver one piece of content on time, one patch without any serious bugs for over a year, and those players have stuck, myself included, with that development studio throughout that time. An apology, a full explanation as to why some of these mistakes were made in terms of honesty and communication with the community, and a clear list of steps as to what is being done to change this in the future for me personally at least, would go a long way in reinstating some trust in DICE as development studio with my favorite game franchise in their hands. We move on then from a clear direction and vision for the game and community trust to fundamental improvements and polish. DICE, after over a year of this game being out, needs to recognize that they simply cannot willy-nilly redesign the entire game. Not only is that a huge waste of resources, which apparently they have so precious little of, but it is also going to anger your entire existing community, which is those people who actually did enjoy at least part of the fundamental design of your game. It's also not something you do when you've got a 3-year life cycle game. You wait to the next game if you want to fundamentally change the way your franchise or your game plays. What that means is DICE needs to stop making these massive changes to the likes of gunplay, spotting, or even other aspects of the game just ad hoc, not gradually and without even proper community consultation or let alone testing. But it also means they need to improve on the fundamentals already here. Where is a proper team balancer? What AAA multiplayer experience doesn't have a proper team balancer in 2019-2020? It's an embarrassment, let's be honest. Other balance issues are also very prevalent in the game, and they weren't actually gunplay. Instead, it's certain areas of vehicle v vehicle combat, such as the fact that bombers can just insta-kill even fully healed, fully repped Tiger tanks. I mean, what's going on there? The same could be said for the long-range tank versus infantry camping that has plagued the game and frankly the enjoyment for an infantry player for quite some time now. What about the assignments and how a lot of them ask you to do either mundane silly tasks or things that simply are contrary to the actual way the weapon is supposed to be played? Why are you asking me to get long-range kills with a close-quarter SMG? And the list really here goes on and on. I'd like to bring in game modes here as a further example of DICE simply throwing whatever works at the wall and seeing if it sticks. Instead of fixing front lines, instead of fixing domination, they simply remove them, something that has angered plenty of people in the community. Instead of fixing grand operations, their big poster child game mode, they've just essentially let it die a slow death. Instead of addressing the problems people had with it, they've just stopped adding maps for those game modes. And while they've continued to add at least some temporary game modes, those, as said, just disappear. They're playable a couple of weeks every year, and that seems to be a massive waste of effort, at least to me. There should be no such thing as a temporary game mode if it's popular with the community. You should have a set number of game modes, and you should make sure that the maps and the game modes work for the player base. If a game mode's unpopular, then either the map design isn't suited to it or something's wrong with the game mode. And you could frankly do a review of each single game mode in Battlefield 5 and come up with a series of improvements that could be made. The two that I would argue are closest to perfect are those that are currently most popular, Conquest and Breakthrough. But with a bit of work, Frontlines and Domination could absolutely be resurrected from the dead. And with quite a significant bit of work, Grand Operations would probably end up being the success DICE wanted it to be. But instead of doing that, they've let it die a slow death. The same goes with Firestorm, the massive, fantastic, big new battle royale that was supposed to accompany Battlefield 5. What happened there? A great start, no further support, no changes made to some of the fundamental issues with it, and thus it's died a slow death. Similar things have happened with the co-op mode, and frankly even the fully cancelled 5v5 mode. DICE keeps on focusing on 1,000 different things, delivering only half of them, and those then are often only half-baked and don't fully realize their potential. Instead of focusing on a select few things, DICE has gone for let's try everything, and it really hasn't worked with Battlefield 5. If anything, go back to Battlefield 1 and look how there was only 4 game modes added after launch with each DLC 1, and those that saw widespread support and saw other maps added beyond just the DLC maps, specifically Frontlines, actually managed to succeed and became a staple part of the gameplay experience. Whereas some of those modes that you just gave a couple of maps to in the DLC, as per usual, quickly died out, despite actually being pretty good in my personal opinion. An example that comes to mind there is Supply Drop with the In the Name of the Tsar DLC. Lastly then, what's elemental to Battlefield 5 succeeding in 2020 and hopefully launching a comeback is the continuation of good content being added to the game. The difference in quality and popularity of the Pacific content, specifically I'd like to focus here on Pacific Storm and Iwo Jima, versus the base game maps and everything that came before it, is noticeable. Not only in the community as such, but I'm pretty sure also over at DICE in their telemetry. Those maps were built for certain game modes, they worked very well for certain game modes, they were very well designed maps, and the community loved them as a result of that. Good quality content is the fundamental of a live service. That's a given, but DICE doesn't seem to have quite figured that out just yet. At least they hadn't previous to the 5.0 update and the Pacific content. That means that they need to continue adding good, iconic new maps and battles, vehicles, even factions, and of course weapons. But it also means that fundamental features that were promised and are yet to be delivered either entirely or at all need to come through. Vehicle customization, for example, a proper RSP system and not this ghostly shell of what RSP once was that we currently have in game. Also, proper cosmetics for those of us not willing to spend hundreds of dollars every month on Boyne's exclusives. We essentially don't get any company coin cosmetics that are really even worth their free company coins in the armory ever. Maybe we've had a couple of them through the entirety of the Battlefield 5 life cycle at this point, the only ones that actually come to mind being the collector's editions for weapons, in my personal opinion. DICE needs to expand and continue delivering solid content for the game, because that's what ultimately drives players to come back week for week and enjoy content and recommend it to their friends and fellow gamers. The last point I want to touch on in this relatively lengthy video at this point is the how of all this, because I don't like bringing out suggestions without actual ways to achieve them in my videos. So how does DICE go about making sure they stick to a clear direction for this game, that they regain the community trust, that they improve the fundamentals of the game and polish what is already good instead of redesigning unnecessarily what doesn't need to be changed? And how do they ensure that the content they are delivering is up to the standard it needs to be to satisfy this community? Well, if they can't do it themselves, which at this point they have demonstrated they really can't, they need to lean on their community, or as they like to call it, the best community in the world, the one they just consistently always seem to ignore when it comes to feedback or opinions. And this is where elements such as CTE, the game changer programs, or even using that oh so toxic and horrible Battlefield 5 Reddit or the Battlefield 5 forums comes into play. Start listening to your community, and even better, start providing outlets for them to engage with you properly. I don't mean the forums, I don't mean the Reddit where you can choose to ignore whatever you wish to. I mean CTE and more actively using the game changers, which while I am not part of, I have heard don't really get to test all that much of the content, and their opinions don't that often really make it into the game design in most cases. If that is true, and at this point I absolutely believe that, then DICE is wasting their valuable resources, because there is plenty of well-organized and very knowledgeable, passionate people in this community that really know a thing or two about weapon design, gun design, map design, vehicle balance. Depending on who you look for, they'll know something different. And listening or working with those people, in my personal opinion, would massively improve the game. The CTE was the saving grace for Battlefield 4. In my opinion, it ensured that Battlefield 1 became better patch for patch and ended up a much better game than it was at launch, despite already launching in a relatively good state, and I can see it being the saving grace for Battlefield 5 once more. Quick shout out here at the end to GetGoodGuy, whose recent video on the reasons why he, at least temporarily, quit Battlefield 5 actually served as somewhat of an inspiration to this video. But that pretty much wraps it up for Battlefield 5 2020 and what I think needs to change. Leave your own opinions, comments down below, but with all that being said, I'd like to thank you very much for watching and hope to see you in the next Battlefield 5 video.